This is the process shot. I'm Michael. I'm stuck in a haunted movie theater, and I've seen Twice Dead, a sorta horror thriller from 1988 directed by Burt L. Dragon, though saying it's a thriller might be overselling it. The story begins in the 1930s when film actor Tyler Walker commits suicide after having lost both his house and his lover to a rival suitor. 50 years later, that suitor's descendants, including brother and sister Scott and Robin, move into the now dilapidated residence, which has become the base of operations for a group of vicious punks. The gang leader, Silk, becomes obsessed with terrorizing the family, while his lackey Crip has his own eyes set on Robin. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the two parties, another house guest still seems to be lurking in the home. It's Tyler's ghost. They make it pretty obvious. Unfortunately, the ghostly aspect of the story doesn't factor in all too much until closer to the end of the movie. It doesn't go ignored entirely, but the film ends up being almost more grounded and realistic, as if it wanted to be about superstition and fear more than being a literal ghost story. Most of the story ends up being the fight between Scott and Silk, both with their own ideas of revenge and terror. And even then, between all of that, there's a good amount of the film that's just talking or standing around. Sometimes it's building up the conflict between them, sometimes it's researching the house itself, and in a few cases it presents Scott and Robin's family dynamic, which gets kind of weird in a few places. It doesn't actually lead to anything, of course, but it's still a weird sort of chemistry. Anyways, for the several ways that the movie subverts expectations, the lack of a ghost story does take away from the experience, since you end up just watching and waiting for an actual ghost to show up and do something. Not only that, but the time spent on other stuff also ends up feeling like a waste, alluding to subplots that don't pay off well if they have an ending at all. It ultimately feels like a story which was initially written to justify its ending, then worked its way backwards to fill up the remaining runtime. The ending is at least justified a bit by its special effects. In fact, the ending scenes are pretty much what save the film, as do a few other moments that make use of practical effects. Of course, these scenes are also where the horror aspects come into focus, so it's not too surprising that this is where that energy picks up. But again, the rest of the story fails to pick up any other slack that it puts down, resulting in a bit of a slow and somewhat boring movie. Visuals are a bit stale, rarely ever taking an opportunity to give the world an interesting look, save maybe for an establishing shot which quickly pushes back into something familiar. Editing is a bit jarring, with tonal whiplash that moves from a scene of horror or suspense to something far more mild, all at a moment's notice. After that, the other technical elements are pretty much a practical decision. Overall, there's really not much to say about the movie on a stylistic level, or even a narrative level. It really does end up being the case that despite the creative potential that is put out there, the resulting film doesn't put it all to much use. Twice Dead, Burt L. Dragon, 1988. 2.5 stars. I'd still say it's worth seeing, if only for the ending. That's it for this review. If you liked it, leave a like. If you have something to add, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. Yeah, it's kind of a shame that this movie didn't have more of an actual ghost in it than you're led to believe. Either they wanted to try something different with the story, or they just didn't have the money for any ghost effects. I wouldn't be surprised if it were the second one.